Separate property can have a major impact on the outcome of a divorce. Separate property is property that one received or had prior to the marriage brought into it, or they received as a gift or an inheritance during the marriage. Sometimes these separate property assets can be substantial, and they can be hiding in places that you didn't expect. It's very common to have a retirement account, something like a 401k, someone started prior to a marriage. And so they may have all of those contributions and employer matches and the growth of all of that that they may have set aside prior to the marriage may be seen as separate property. And then what was contributed during the marriage and the growth of that is community property. And then once we get past the date of separation again, that contributions, employer matches, and the growth are separate property. Same with pensions. They may have started that role prior to getting married. And so there's a portion of these retirement accounts that are separate property and community or marital property. So how do you prove that is the next question. And the answer is it depends. If you're working through litigation, you're likely to need forensic accounting for that. You may have to demonstrate by providing all of the statements from the date of inception, or at least the date of marriage through the date of separation, to show that that asset was that value at the start and how it developed over time. If you are working through mediation, you may not need to go to those links. If both of you are comfortable with it, it may be enough to identify that there was a certain amount at the time of marriage. Hopefully you have a statement that can show what that was. Based on how that investment, what was invested, what was its asset allocation, you can find a benchmark that is very similar to that. Using the returns of that benchmark from the date of marriage through the date of separation can provide you with a rate of return you can apply to your premarital value to determine what is it worth now as separate property. Sometimes separate property can't be demonstrated, but both spouses remember that there was something and they want to honor that. And at the end of the day, all of it really takes is for the two of you to be in agreement that there is separate property and then to have decided on what that amount was. You can also treat separate property as community property, obviously. That's going to effectively disadvantage one spouse from their legal rights. But there are lots of people working through mediation who want to make sure the other spouse is taken care of, recognize that they may have an advantage, and want to find some way to equalize it. So separate property can make major changes on divorce because if there is a substantial amount of separate property, that spouse is going to keep that separate property. And then if they're in a community property state, divide the community property 50-50. So they will have a big advantage on assets. If it's an equitable distribution state, those separate property assets are taken into account, and it may not be a 50-50 division of the marital assets. But it all depends on the state, and it all depends on the circumstances. Separate property is the sort of thing that you really need to identify early on, give some consideration to, and depending on your process, that will allow you to understand how you might need to prove that. I'm John Duffy. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. If you need more tips on divorce, please follow me.